Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this One Nucleus Life Science Marketing Group in collaboration with Giggabox Limited. Today, this webinar is going to review the transition from virtual to hybrid and live events for the life sciences sector. As with all our Life Science Marketing Group events, the aim is to share the knowledge of our network and members. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Paul Musselle, CEO of Giggabox, to take us through the presentation. And before beginning, we'd be grateful if you could stay on mute during the presentation. And a quick reminder that we're recording this event and we'll make the presentation available to attendees after the event and also as part of the One Nucleus OnDemand Content. Thanks a lot, and it's over to you, Paul.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Great to have so many of you with us. Thanks for joining. I know that everyone's very busy. And as we try to navigate our way through relaxations, if I could just remind everyone again to just, if you're not already on mute, if you can just put yourself on mute for the time being, that would be great, save the distractions. I'm going to go through this quite quickly. My hope and aspiration is that we set up some conversations amongst all of us, which we might not necessarily get to today, but certainly my plan is to have a Q&A at the end. So if you pick up any questions as we go through, or if you've got something, a burning issue that you want to get off your chest, then please shout out when we get to the Q&A towards the end. So I'm going to crack on. For those of you who don't know me, Natalie's already said I'm CEO of Giggabox. I've been 40 years in the broadcasting, event and content delivery and production business. I'm a former Sky Sports producer and BBC presenter and producer and executive producer. So I've made my way through those various ranks. And all of those things together with the live streaming experience that we've gathered as a business and personally, we did our first live stream back in 2009, I suppose created almost the perfect storm for us in terms of virtual and then going on to hybrid events, because of course you bring together that live streaming, TV and event experience, and hey presto, you've got pretty much a recipe for virtual and hybrid events. And having really launched that to the market in June of last year, we completed our 100th virtual event last month. So it's been busy. Today, what I hope to do is give you some insights into what's happening and where our thoughts are in terms of what's happening in the greater wider world with virtual and hybrid events, and looking ahead to when we may get back to live. But generally, we're feeling that hybrid is the way, and hence why today's focus is really about looking at the hybrid event. Although if you've got questions later about virtual or live itself, then happy to look at those. And what I want to do is present some ideas that I hope you'll be able to either take away or evolve and put those into practice in your own events. We'll talk through what we think are the keys to hosting and delivering a successful hybrid event, discuss the basics of a hybrid event, and also consider what considerations there should be for designing an event. What's all the things that might go into it? And then also, perhaps crucially at the moment, especially with this pesky Indian variant kicking about, and I dare say there'll be others, how to adapt your event strategy around this new and what will be a really necessary event. So we all know it's been a crazy 12 months. I just ask you to think for a moment what words you would use for the past 12 months. We might get the bleep machine ready, but hopefully we won't need it. Because in a matter of days last year, didn't we? For those of us operating in a live event atmosphere and environment, conferences, events, all cancelled. They've been planned for months and suddenly, boom, all gone. And we had to pivot ourselves to the new normal of what was then the virtual events. And you had to learn how to create effective events where no one could attend. And if we'd have said that, I suspect back in 2018, we'd have all been going, are you mad? We're always going to have people at our events. And it turns out, no, we're not. Although hopefully that will come back. So we had to innovate. We had to learn lots of lessons. And we all discovered, hey, presto, virtual events not only work, but have some great benefits as well. Now, I'm going to put it out there straight away and say that hybrid events, in our view, and what we can see going on in the market and talking to all our various clients, hybrid events are going to become the norm. We're changed forever. When one of my clients, dear Dennis, who has been trying not to have any sort of digital aspect to his global sports events for the past 7 or 8 years, finally said to me, I'm not going back, Paul. It took a coronavirus to get him to switch, but when he says I'm not going back, then that's a great litmus test for how the various parts of the market are thinking. And we'll talk about some of the benefits of and understandings of why that might be. So we know the benefits of attending online events now. We also understand the limitations. And to think that virtual attendance won't continue after this crisis ends and we emerge into the blinking into the light of live events, to think that virtual elements and digital elements won't be there is naive at best. And while virtual continue, guess what? Hybrid can provide us with the best of both worlds. So why am I saying that hybrid will become the norm? Well, as a great unwashed, as a great British public and a great international public for that matter, we won't attend events now at all costs. We've all realised that a lot of meetings in person are completely unnecessary. Travelling for hundreds or even for some people thousands of miles when they're doing international events and polluting the environment for a 2-hour meeting or even a one-day conference is a complete waste of resources, and it's money that few, either individually or as businesses, will be able to continue to afford. And I dare say that the financial heads in our various organisations will look down those lines and go, oh, hang on a minute, that's saved us quite a lot of money as well. And we seem to have the same outcomes. There was a great article published by FIFA, the World Football Federation, who would normally spend about 26 million euros flying people from all their different corners of the world. And that's what their conference costs would be, with entertainment and flights and F&B, food and beverage, and all that goes around it for a 10-day event. And that 26 million, they only spent 2.8 million this year. So a massive, massive saving of 90%. So we also think that, and the evidence seems to suggest that once the widespread economic support of government fades away, many companies will need to cut those luxuries, such as corporate travel, to enable events, international events, to be attended. So virtual will be preferred. And then, of course, you've got the audience view represented by these darlings. There are those who who don't want to travel. She definitely looks like she doesn't want to go anywhere. There are, of course, the vulnerable. There are those who think, you know what, I just don't want to invest the time. I'd rather have that time and maybe perhaps the personal cost saving of time as well. There are, of course, those who can't wait, like our chap in his seat there, he's ready to go. And there are those who are going to be told, no, you can't go for various reasons, because employers don't want to risk their workforce falling ill or transmitting the virus or whatever other issues there might be. So, and whilst there are those who've enjoyed virtual, they're not needing to travel, they're not needing to stay away overnight, the extra time with family, the personal time, we're all really adapted well to that virtual environment. And then, of course, there's the venue issue as well, the venue view, where we've seen signs like this on the top in sports stadiums where seats have been blocked out. And then we've seen things like we're doing at Giggabox in the lower element of that right-hand picture, where the virtual hybrid is taking shape and becoming more TV-esque, which we'll talk about during the course of the meeting. So while those restrictions continue on capacity, whether they're government imposed or venue self-imposed, or attendees just voting with their feet and saying, I'm not going. And while we've got the international travel limits, that's going to affect attendees, but it's also going to impact on speakers and their accessibility and availability. And there will be demand for larger venues, but with less people in those spaces. So whereas before you might have had 100 people event in 100 person venue, you're now perhaps going to be looking for a 500 venue person venue, get my words in the right order, 500 person venue in order to be able to have 100 people in that space. So these are all challenges. And then what does that do to the buzz of a live event? How does that impact on things? And the venues are going to change as well. And we're already working with 2 major venues where we're helping them to realign the spaces that they've got into more TV studios. So with green screen facilities, with facilities for hosting more of a TV show, that panel show sort of debate, and then being able to connect in the audience and bring the audience into that venue virtually. So more TV show, less conference is another way we see things going. But of course, there are many benefits to be had from a successful event. I'm sure you've seen this yourself with your own events. The increased attendance with hybrid events, you've got the advantage of both the in-person element and also all of the virtual counterparts. So as we've said already, those people who don't have the time or the ability or inclination to travel, those in-person events can also carry a big price tag, and that deters individuals as well from perhaps deciding to register for an event if they've got to travel. Whereas with a hybrid event, of course, those individuals can be even more compelled to attend, so they can do so like we're doing today from the comfort of our own home and office. And I've even adopted the relaxed style of address as we're relaxing out, but there's a reason for that, and I'll tell you that at the end. And of course, it means a lower cost for them. And so pivoting to hybrid will help you attract more registrants than a solely in-person event. That's one of the key advantages. Another key advantage is the ability to have enhanced content. So when you host a hybrid event, you'll be live streaming your speakers and sessions for virtual attendees to view perhaps. And that allows you to record those sessions like we're doing today for archive. When we were doing live events, how many people actually recorded their speakers? Not many, I can tell you, because we were providing the options for that and people didn't want it. So we've got that. We can use that for multiple use, of course, social media, future collateral. We can use it for training, giving speakers feedback, and as sending those as a thank you to our contributors to say, thanks for doing that for us. And here's a recording of the event. Send them out after the event. Attendees can re-watch if we want to revisit a session or if we missed a session. And we can engage with that content for days, if not weeks, or even months after the event is over. So all of that combines to give you the advantage of keeping your event, your business, your company, your brand right in the minds of your attendees long after the event has concluded. There's the obvious one, some would say, of the lower carbon footprint, because by reducing the number of on-site attendees, you've clearly reduced your carbon footprint, less travel, fewer meals that are thrown away, less transportation of equipment, all of that kit that's brought in for tables and chairs often isn't at the venue and it's brought in. And of course, there's all of the impact from that as well. So with this in mind, if you're following the route of hybrid, your business is also not only going to be seen as a visionary when it comes to events, but also as an environmentally conscious, responsible business too. And I'm sure most of you already are that. This gives an opportunity to add to that and increase that footprint. And this is the one that gets the most response. For those of you who have a need to supplement your events and you need to raise funds, so in the way that Nucleus will provide these events for us, there are other organisations who you've paid for your ticket, and there's that now rebalancing of how do the commercials work for a virtual and hybrid event. And one of the things I keep saying to people is, now that your event's hybrid, your sponsors have double the audience. They're getting double the exposure. They've got your in-house audience. They're going to have your in-house audience, even if it's a small one, but they're also then all those virtual attendees. And I go back to the sports event that I referred to a few minutes ago with Dear Dennis, who in 2019 had 300 people in an exhibition space at Villa Park in Birmingham. When we ran that event digitally for him in 2020, it had over 1,500 attendees from 65 different countries and 55 speakers many of who were from overseas. Never would have got that kind of engagement previously, and has seen the business grow as a result of that. So hosting at least part of the event in a digital environment creates those new opportunities for brand awareness, but also for lead generation. You're making connections all around. So if you've got a sales organization element to the business, then another opportunity for them to connect. So by offering your sponsors more value, there's a real key in this, and that is to make sure that you're really calibrating that value that you're adding to them and not letting them think, oh, well, we haven't got people there in person. It doesn't have the same value. Well, guess what? We're giving you a much bigger audience, more eyeballs, plus, of course, the opportunity to revisit that content online after the event as well. All that adds up, and that can offset some of the technical costs of running a hybrid event, because you are going to be having effectively two events side by side. So that might pose the question, that's all well and good, Paul, but where do we start? Let's have a look at some of the things. The first thing I would recommend you try and do if you can, or have your team do if it's a team running it for you, is shift to an event producer mentality. And by that, I mean producer more in the TV-esque sense of the word. Build a team around you, because creating a successful hybrid event is going to take a lot of work. You'll have seen that already with virtual. So think of yourself as the designer of this event program, and appoint an experienced external hybrid event producer who can support and help deliver that vision that you've created. And it's important they can do that creatively as well as technically, because these skills are going to be in short supply. And then together you can build that program that's really effective for both your in-person and your virtual attendees. And we're going to have a look at some things you can do to help that bring that all together, because it needs to be an engaging and effective program that really does satisfy both audiences. Otherwise, your hybrid events won't be around for very long at all. Now, 5 doors. While I have a little swig of water, just pick your favourite door, for nothing else other than a bit of interest and chance for me to have a swig of water. Who picked the middle one, the red door? There's some psychology behind that, but we won't go into that right now. So what are the 5 elements of a successful hybrid event? Well, we see them as planning, content, bringing the audience together, budgeting and revenues, and then really key at the end, the analytics. What do we learn from the event? So let's have a look at some of that. You cannot start early enough. I was saying to Natalie and Alicia before we started that in our business, generally, we'd have 4 or 5 inquiries a week about events that are coming up. In the first 2 days, because of the Indian variant and because people have been thinking, oh, not sure which direction we're now going in, we had 11 inquiries just Monday and Tuesday alone for people saying, what do we do now? How do we work it out? And we'll talk about some of the things that you can do. So hybrid events, you need a total event strategy because it requires a huge amount of planning and a lot of brainstorming, probably as much as 4 times the amount you would put into a live event. Yeah, as much as 4 times. So your first question is going to be, are you hosting an internal or an external event? And do you have the tools needed to market and promote your hybrid event effectively? And what are you hoping your attendees will get out of this event? We're often amazed by when we'll say, okay, what's the purpose of the event and what do you want your attendees to get out of it? And that second one is often missing. So it's a really crucial question. What do you want your audience to get out of it? Because otherwise, how are you going to measure whether they've enjoyed it or not, other than perhaps buying another ticket or revisiting? So the answers to those questions will help you build and begin to build at least a really effective program. So let's have a look at what we mean by the internal hybrid events. These would be programs that are held to benefit the company's internal stakeholders. So employees, leadership team, staff, you could probably add into that to some extent shareholders as well. So AGMs, that sort of thing. But for many companies, it's nearly impossible to get all those stakeholders into one room. So this is where a hybrid event win big. You might have your venue, say a corporate headquarters, and it doesn't matter whether that's a corporate HQ with 20 people in it and a smaller meeting room, or whether you're one of the massive multinationals and you're falling over yourself with live spaces. Having that live space, having that space where you can host a live event is a bonus. And then you're going to live stream the meeting to the rest of your company. So again, examples of common internal hybrid events, the sales kickoff meetings, the town halls, those larger team meetings, company announcements, and so on. In terms of external, those are programs that are faced on customers, prospects, clients, members, if you're a membership organization or Nucleus. And then transitioning your live external event to a hybrid setting can give you access to those external speakers we were talking about and contributors who can't or won't travel. So you can draw in more attendees, you get much better access to speakers and contributors, lower your carbon footprint, and you can reduce your budget requirements as well. You don't need to hire those big halls. And those will be things like conferences, trade shows, customer conferences, product demos really work well on that external facing hybrid event. So what about some goals for hybrid? What sorts of things should we be thinking about? These are the things we want to try and set out and achieve. Well, obviously, number one, engage as many of your attendees as possible. Provide a choice. Obviously, it seems obvious with hybrid, but often if you're not really catering for those 2 audiences, one will get missed and they won't have a great experience. Hybrid allows you to connect people in person if they want that human connection, allows those who otherwise would not want to travel because of ill health or travel constraints, they can engage virtually, as we know, through hybrid. And that then gives us an opportunity to make this fantastic experience for both groups. So providing choice means that we've given them the opportunity to interact with your content and, of course, your brand and business. But why are you bothering at all? It might sound a strange question from a hybrid event production business, but why are you bothering? What's What's the reason? What's the motivation for you to want to put an event on in the first place anyway? Take the time to identify the objectives of what you want to do, whether it's virtual, hybrid, or eventually live. What is it you want to do, or what is it you've been asked by your taskmasters to do? And start with these 5 questions. Why are you doing it in the first place? What's the purpose? We talked about that before. Who is the audience? Not just in terms of their names and their roles, but actually, what are they coming to see? What do you want them to hear? And what expertise will you need to help you deliver those outcomes that you need and want? And then we start our hybrid event creation journey. Gives us the building blocks. So principal amongst those building blocks is marketing. How are you going to market your hybrid event? You're going to have both those audiences. You get that chance to deliver, remember, to double the audience, potentially the type of attendees. But what should be in your marketing plan? There's a few things there that we've recommended. How are you going to reach them? Where will the event live online? Is it going to be a landing page that's set up bespoke? Is it going to be on your website? Is it going to be are you going to create a bespoke platform to give them that broader experience? Or are you just going to go via YouTube, Vimeo, or any of the other platforms? Will it be a hop-in? Will it be one of those other platforms that have been created? And what information are you going to display in your marketing? What's the communication message? And if you're charging, how much and how are you going to collect it? And have you got your sponsorship packs ready? Do you know what the offer is to your sponsors? Do you know where they can have their branding? Can you show them physical examples of where that's going to be? Because they're going to ask for that. Can you create early bird offers like we used to do with live? And what other incentives can you do? So I know for some of you, this is meat and drink, but it's applying it to that hybrid element as well. So let's figure that we've got our marketing plan sorted out, and now we're thinking about registration. So we need a really seamless and simple process, as we know. Your physical audience, will they use what you've used before? If they're coming to a venue, what system have you had in place there? And is that the sort of thing you're going to run? Or do you want a custom registration path that allows your in-person attendees and your virtual attendees to sign up for appropriate sessions? Because it might be that you're going to run different sessions for those different audiences. We'll talk a bit more about that and what decision-making process we might go through to achieve that. Or if you're creating your branded event registration page, is that going to be branded with your colours of your organisation and have all the event information on it? Or is it just literally a registration page and you're providing the timetable in a different way? Just being clear on what your path and what your route is to both of these different markets, if you like. How will you ensure they're going to get that information? And how will you keep track of those who maybe get through a registration and then abandon it partway through? Are you going to automatically have some way or system where you can reconnect with them and say, oh, we noticed that you'd started to register, but you didn't quite complete it. How can we help? That sort of thing. So we've got through registration, and hopefully we're getting into a situation where we might want to create something that looks like this. Just thought we'd drop this in to look at the sort of thing that you can create with a studio type space where you can bring the audience in and bring those two audiences together and connect them up. So it's all about user experience, but it's also all about content. Content is still all. So primary one, engaging content. Sounds obvious, but the content is arguably the more important now we're going to hybrid than during a live event. And again, it's because you might have some considerations about those two different audiences. You won't be able to deliver, physically impossible to deliver the same content the same way for both those groups. Some in the room, some sat online. So how are you going to do that? And this is something we talk about where we want to keep both audiences really engaged. Something we talk about: one event, but two experiences. So one event, your event, but two experiences, the virtual audience and the in-person audience. And it's much more difficult when it's those virtual attendees to keep them engaged in front of a screen like we're doing now. So to keep that content engaging, make sure it's going to translate well over video. And by video, I mean this live connection as well, as much as it is in that live in-person setting. Some things we can look at as to how we might do that. So When you create your registration paths, have a think about whether there'll be certain sessions that are only going to be for your in-person audience and certain sessions that will only be for your virtual attendees. And we look at how you can differentiate those. Do you want to have a host for your in-person networking session? If you're going to have a networking session, are you going to have one session that's going to be for your audience in person, different session online, or do you want to bring the two together? There are ways of doing that. It's not the simplest of things, and it's getting easier, but it's something we've been doing, and it's something that can work and does go down very well. So if you're going to have, let's say, a networking session in the real world venue, what are you going to offer your virtual attendees instead? So have a think about that when you're doing this registration path and think about your timetables, how that's going to all connect up. And if you do create separate content, so some of those large sessions like your keynote presentation and so on, that's going to be viewed by both on-site and virtual attendees, you would imagine. But don't make your virtual attendees watch sessions they can't actively participate in. So it would be crass, wouldn't it, to have them watch a panel debate unless they're able to contribute in some way. And again, that's another aspect we'll look at in a moment. So often those virtual attendees may have their own virtual only session with perhaps an industry expert or a panel that's just solely living in the virtual digital space that only they get access to, and something else is happening in the room. So a typical one might be a networking session happening physically in the room for those who are attending, but online, one of your speakers might be doing a workshop with the online group or an added bonus bit of material that they are only getting while they're online. It's thinking about how you can build those different aspects. So another aspect to that is that back to this registration path, there are ways in which you can create separate timetables for each audience. So you can either make them visible or you can make them invisible. So they don't have to see what each is doing. So you don't get kind of that envy going on. Of course, that then goes back to how you might promote and publicize that. But those are all the things you need to think about and all those considerations. So this is why we say a lot goes into the planning and organization. And of course, the other aspect is how many sessions will you host? I've definitely been that guy on the left at quite a lot of sessions. I felt like I'm absolutely bombarded. There's no need to overwhelm people with that information and content. Less really is more. We've seen, haven't we? You know, this if we ran this as a 3-hour session, I'm sure many of you would be dropping off with it after about an hour. And I'd like to think not just because of the content or the delivery, but just because when you're sat in your chair, you want to get up and move about. You don't want to sit there all day. Whereas the on-site attendees, they're more likely to attend more sessions because they've traveled in person to attend, and also they're having regular breaks in between. So your virtual attendees will likely have a shorter attention span just because they're in front of the computer screen. We've all seen that, haven't we, since lockdown of 2020. So one solution, although it might sound contrary, is to offer fewer live sessions per day for your virtual attendees, and then that way they don't feel swamped. Because remember, you can always make that available on demand, so they're not losing out. So there's still that opportunity to balance the content. And talking more about those sessions, how long are they going to be? Will you run a 1-hour session? They're becoming few and far between now. A half hour, 15 minutes, or a variety of lengths. We found on the sessions and the plans that we've put together, having a real mixture helps people keep invigorated and keep them engaged. So aim for a balance would be our recommendation. Long enough that all the information can be shared, but concise enough that the virtual attendees continue their focus and their engagement. Another thing we really recommend, and this is going to be crucial, we think, when you start to think about your hybrid events, is keep everyone aware of what's in your agenda. Keep them excited, keep them, that word again, engaged. So during an on-site event, it would be unheard of to not have either the voice of God with making announcements or somebody coming on to stage as your event host to say, okay, we enjoyed that session, and now the next we're going to do this. Well, make sure the same experience is given to your virtual attendees. Some of you may have already been doing it. It doesn't happen on every event we do. We strongly recommend it. Have a virtual host, and not someone who's just generally someone from amongst the team themselves. There are some good people in those teams, but generally you need a professional host who's going to be able to convey that information, keep the whole thing moving, keep that audience engaged, keep them with you. Remind them of what session's coming next, so they want to come back and attend when they've nipped off for a coffee or check their email. And of course, remember, you can use gamification as well for the online audience. Drop little games in, don't have to be big long things. It can be just a short, sharp hit to just, again, give them that extra added bit of value. And so you don't end up with this at the other end of your conference. Offer your content on demand. Again, it keeps that screen time down. Virtual attendees, we know, need more breaks during the day. They may be able to only join an event for a short period of time, but again, they can get that and pick up on the on-demand content. So how are we going to bring these audiences together? He said, just glancing at the clock to make sure we're on time. It's going to be absolutely crucial to make hybrid work. The on-site attendees have this benefit of what we call community. They have that feeling of being part of something that's going on, but we know they're probably going to be limited numbers, and we know there's a huge number of people who don't want to actually go just yet. So much easier for them when they're in situ to network in person, have those organic conversations, the one you start at the coffee machine, establish connections. But there are ways to bring that community of the live audience to your virtual audience as well. And we're doing some really quite cool things now where we're getting an audience that are sat at home or in their office, aren't able to engage, by putting them into a networking session, for example, with somebody who's physically at the venue and connecting those up. And we're using mobile technology and apps to do that. That's quite a cool thing. And I think that will evolve. The other thing I would suggest, if you're not already doing this, I'm sure you are, but live polls and Q&As into your sessions, absolutely vital, whether you use Slido or any other connectivity that's available. Bringing those people who are sat at home thinking, oh, what's going on in the room, that's going to be even more valuable. And they can have their say, of course, through these polls and live Q&A. But again, back to your host, needs to be able to relay and convey that that's happening, and that it's them that are making that contribution. So again, bit more TV than conference. If you think about it, the poll on TV, here's the result. You said this. Your virtual attendee also might ask a question that's never occurred to somebody in the room. And one of the things I'd really recommend is look for a provider when you're looking at hybrid who can bring those attendees in. We've been looking now at bringing an attendee who's a virtual attendee, bringing them into the space and putting them on the screen and having them ask their question live in the hall. Makes for great feeling of a sense of they're actually contributing. We talked about the polls, and also, of course, keeping them tight and short. And no one wants to sit through a 2-hour keynote, even though I suspect over the years we all have at some time. And having those collaborative virtual sessions. So these are the sessions that you might run for just your audience online. So they can have breakout sessions. We can create breakout rooms within meetings if we need to do that. That enables those who are attending virtually, as we were saying, to connect on site as well. And we can bring those attendees into the room. That was the example I was using, bring them in, put them on a big screen in the room, having them interact with the audience there. So technology, as we've discovered since June of last year, can do amazing things. And we've been challenged by lots of clients to say, yeah, but could we do this? And with a bit of time and effort, yeah, we can. I hesitate before I say we've yet to be beaten, just in case there was something that came to mind. But I think generally, if you can imagine it, we'll find a way to create it. Appointment scheduling, so networking, if you like. This is where you might want to think about opening up any online platform to both audiences. One of those things where you might say, look, both of you're coming in person, but also get involved online as well. So you can connect your audiences there. A lot of platforms, you can open them up 7 days before. They can start making appointments, whether they're going to do that in the build up to the meeting or during the meeting or post meeting, and all things can be accommodated there. So then you come to budget and revenues, and I emphasize the revenues there because I mentioned before you're going to be running 2 different events effectively. So budget's going to be key, but looking at ways where you can generate revenues, but not just any old revenues, but revenues that really do deliver value back to those clients. So here's some images from a recent hybrid event we did in the break we had between November, December, when we could do those. they're going to need a new set of partners, someone who has done both virtual and live. So look for that technical and creative expertise. The AV market, the audiovisual market as we knew it, is being completely reshaped. A lot of people have gone out of the business, sadly. And those who don't carry the baggage of all of that events kit that's not going to be used anymore, or certainly not to the same extent, are probably going to be less competitive. So there'll be more opportunities for you. There might be more opportunities to look at different and new providers. So save budget on large expensive venues, save it on travel, accommodation, food, so you can divert those savings into the attendee experience. So rather than having, all those meals that used to be done, putting people up in expensive hotel rooms, that can all go, and you can give them a much better experience. And I mentioned sponsorship, the revenue side of things. Hybrid presents incredible opportunities for that. Your sponsorship dollars or pounds, partnership revenue allow you to balance your budget, enable you to ensure your sponsors receive, I would say in many cases, if not all, more value from you as they would have done from an on-site event. I mentioned before the event that had those 300 people on site, but actually when it went to that hybrid model and turned it then into a virtual model, 1,500 attended. And we've seen events that have gone into the tens of thousands. One of our first scary events, we were told by a travel sector back in the summer of last year to expect 12,000 people for an event, an online event, a global online event, and over 80,000 turned up. And happily, it all didn't fall over. And it was a resounding success. So it just shows you, if you get the right messaging out there, you can do these huge events and really get some great communication going. So really have a look at what you're delivering for your partners and your sponsors, and make sure they know that. They won't know if you don't tell them. So make sure they see and they recognize the return on the investment that you're providing them with. Mention more branding opportunities, and certainly in the online examples, banner headlines, as you can see on this, virtual backgrounds, lower third elements can all be branded. And they're just a few examples. So video can be branded with the little, what we call the bug up in the corner. Graphics packages can be branded. You can send out push notifications, also can be branded. Your website page, of course. You can have virtual sponsor booths and exhibitions. And I'm share one example that we had a client who was really struggling to get people to engage with their exhibition areas. And so what we did was configured an opportunity for him to say to those attendees, there was a 2-tier price system. So if you bought a ticket at the premium amount of, let's say, £195 for the one-day event, you could just attend and you didn't have to fulfill anything. But if you wanted a really discounted ticket of £49, then you had to attend 3 networking sessions, attend exhibition, 4 or 5 exhibition stands, and others have engagement with the stand, because his positioning was, we're going to give you a discounted experience, but in return, you're going to give us something. You're going to meet with our sponsors, meet with our partners, and see if we can set up some dialogue. Hasn't changed that model now at all. Worked really well, and gone from where there's been an opportunity to, for those who don't want to have that engagement, can pay a higher amount, and that's covering the amount that he's losing from that lesser engagement with exhibitors. So lots of things that you can do and develop. And I'm sure everyone's doing this anyway, please. Post-event actions are as important, and I actually think more important than what you're doing in an event, particularly at the moment where things are changing and the audience is changing. You need to keep up with them. You need to understand what they want from an event. So if you host an event and don't do any analytics, I would say don't even bother with the event if you're not going to do that. Whether it's a SurveyMonkey link or some other system you're using for getting that post-event feedback, make sure also your host encourages attendees to do that there and then at the end of the event, because once they've gone, it's very rare they do engage. A small percentage will. Or you can incentivize them. We know that works. Give them an incentive, maybe access to additional content. It might be a discount for a future event. But the data you'll get, you'll know what content has resonated with people, so you can do more of what works and less of what didn't. You'll know how your attendees felt. If things were done incorrectly, you can put those right. So also take a look at the data of what your attendees did during the event, which sessions did they achieve, did they attend? How long did they stay there? Did they engage with the Q&A? Did they ask a question? Did they get involved with the poll? All of those sorts of things. And make sure you follow up with those attendees who ask lots of questions. There's always those who will do that. They and the ones that engage with your sponsors for getting feedback for those sponsors and partners. For those of you working internationally, just a quick word on time zones. I don't know if you've been caught out with time zones. We certainly were in the early years of doing the international side of our events. It's just a question of planning. So you might end up doing a 14-hour window with events planned over all of those time zones, or guess what? Do them on 2 different days. You know, do one that's morning based, one that's afternoon based. It'll give you a larger international spread. As it says, you know, you're likely to get someone in California attend a keynote speech live at 8:30 in the morning BST, unless they're a late to bedder. And make sure that any sessions that you're doing, of course, are available on demand. And if you can, another thing we've seen is where sessions have been done perhaps early in the morning and then later in the afternoon, where a speaker has been able to do both. That can work quite well. And of course, you can always replay that one out. It doesn't have to be live. You can record the one in the morning and just play it out in the afternoon. I don't know if you're like me, but when I see that left-hand image come up on my phone, it's almost like a fear of dread. Like I just do not want to press that green button. So I put that there to make you think about how the past few months, in fact more than a few months now, have been nothing short of unpredictable. And we already know that's going to be happening for the rest of this year, next, and probably through into the first quarter of 2022 as well, and maybe even beyond that. So learning lessons from what we've learned are really key, but incorporating these virtual and hybrid events into your total event strategy. So at least having a plan. There's nothing wrong with thinking, do you know what, in March of next year we could have a live event, and maybe you can, but have a plan that allows you to pivot, allows you to switch and move between the live to hybrid, hybrid to virtual. It will give you complete peace of mind. We introduced something at Giggabox called the Pivot Guarantee. So any of our clients who set off as a virtual event and then want to pivot to hybrid and then want to pivot again to live, they can do that. There's a cost difference, but I give you one example of a major international event we're running in June, which was planned to be hybrid and costed to be hybrid, but they've pivoted that now to be fully virtual and actually has reduced their budget overall by about $4 or $5 grand a day. So it doesn't have to be you don't have to be thinking, oh, it's just going to cost me more if I pivot. It may be that it reduces your budget as well. And getting towards the close here, what I'd also have in mind is, what are the questions you now need to be asking your provider? So not only just what is their live event experience, what's their virtual experience, what's their live streaming experience? It's different from running just a virtual event. What's their TV broadcast production experience? What can they bring to that table? And if they've got all those to your satisfaction, then what's actually their hybrid event experience? What have they done? What have they delivered? If any of you would, as a result of watching this, like to have a consultation with me or one of my team about where you are with your events, we're more than happy to do that. We realise it's a dramatically changing vista out there, and sadly it's going to carry on changing for the rest of this year and probably into 2022, and then even beyond that. So if you've got thoughts and thinking, I'm not quite sure where to do, myself, David, Phil, any of the team will be happy to chat with you, whether it's on the phone or over a Zoom call, and look at what you're trying to achieve and see if we can help you, at least steer you in the right direction as far as those events are concerned. We've got many trusted partnerships that we've established over the years that we've been in business, and we'd like to continue to extend that. So if we can help in any way, let us know. And I suppose that is probably a good moment, Natalie, for me to stop sharing my screen to thank you all so much for your attendance and for listening to me hopefully deliver something that's been of value. And if it's worthwhile, we can open up the floor to questions for the last 15 minutes if you'd like to, Natalie.
Yes, that sounds good. I see, sorry, there's a couple of chat questions.
Yeah, so I see, so Alicia's saying, what about those who are physically present also having an online presence? Absolutely, yeah. There's Ways in which that can be done either in the room through feeding that through screens and interacting. We're working on something at the moment for a medical conference in February where we're going to do exactly that. We're actually going to have breakout rooms where there will be our event organisers challenge us to have 3 people in the room who will be sat there from a physical point of view, but then to bring in 3 other people who will engage with them and see how that works. Then they'll go back into the main room and give that feedback session. So only done with a few select sessions, but yeah, that's achievable for sure. Another element that's coming along will be the use of a hybrid app. So there'll be a hybrid app which will allow you to connect on your telephone with people who are virtually present as opposed to physically present. And you can either set up a meeting, have an online video chat there, and that's connecting the two. I hope that answers that question. I'm not sure who that came from.
Yes, thanks, Paul. Alicia,
Brilliant.
Thanks. Yep, all good.
Thanks, Alicia. Good one to kick us off with. What would my top bit of advice be for hybrid event organisers? It would be to have a plan that allows you to pivot right now. That would be number one. Have a plan that allows you to pivot back to virtual if you need to, or to go from virtual to hybrid. From hybrid to live if and when things allow. The most likelihood is you're probably planning now, well, let's get a little bit of a live element. And perhaps the other thing to add to that is there are effectively a couple of types of hybrid, apart from the internal, external we've talked about. There's the hybrid event where all that's in the real life space are your presenters, your contributors and your speakers, and you may still add to those virtually, but you might, for example, get a panel together who speak individually, and then there's a panel questioning. So that's getting the interaction between the hybrid and the real element. And then of course that wider one where you've got the real audience in there as well. So I want to be able to pivot right now because we don't know where this is going. You guys are all working at the coalface and have done such an amazing job in your sector to get us where we are and getting jabs in our arms and everything that's associated with it. So thank you for that while we're here. Thinking about registration security, what experience have you had of ensuring delegates arrive with their name and company on their Zoom name like a badge? Yeah, there's it goes back to the registration path and deciding and determining how you want that to work. We work with one platform where you pre-register and then it creates an attendee list. And of course, then you have to give permission to share your data to make sure it's all GDPR compliant. But then people can connect from there. Once they can also receive a request to connect. So you have, if you like, your virtual name badge set up in the network, and all that has is your first name and your surname initial, and then it might have your the company that you work for. So it's very limited information, and then you can connect with those people, and we're going to see more and more of that, people connecting up, and then taking those offline as well through LinkedIn and other aspects. How have you found jumping from different platforms? So Zoom for the main meeting, say wandering for the network, and the issue of both. Yeah, technically, apps stealing camera functionality is one of the biggest issues that we come across, Lucy. So great question. If you're hosting the event yourself, make sure on your pre-event checklist you have that marked down as a potential issue and explain that to your contributor. We in the early days used to have people arriving if we were hosting something on Zoom, and it normally happened that way around. If they'd been on Teams during the morning, let's say, and they were coming in for an afternoon networking session or just some sort of training session, Teams would keep the camera and they were going, "Oh, I can't see, you can't see me," and we quickly figured out what it was. So a little tip is just exiting out of Teams doesn't free up your camera often. You've got to completely quit the program, and then of course if you restart your computer it'll take it back, so you've got to quit out properly. I hope I've answered that question. Do shout in if you don't feel I'm answering these. I'm not offended at all. Martin, I just saw Martin pop up. Good to see you there, Martin. How do you calculate a differential on registration cost versus those attending virtually? I.e., if I attend physically, I can see some of where my registration fee has gone. I can't always see that for the virtual conference. Yeah, I think we've got a challenge there, Martin, to re-engineer the thinking of our virtual attendees. And I think it's about delivering value. So for example, if we were going to run a session, I'm going to pick something from the entertainment world. Who's massively famous? I don't know. I'm just going to take that because it's in my head. Don't know why. If you have a real interest in that subject, you're prepared to pay more. It's why they can charge tens of pounds for their tickets. So I think it's about getting your content and really pushing home what your content is and the experience you're giving people. But I would be trying to condense it into a shorter time frame as well. I think that we're going to see a shift away from people. I had to attend an event last week, and it was 11 hours all online, and it was the most horrific virtual experience I've had since we had to start doing them. I'm sure you've had some yourself. Yeah, there were breaks, but it was really quite intense. And what they were trying to do was really fit a 3-day program into a day, thinking, well, that'll be better for everyone because it's just a day. Actually, it wiped people out, and there's a significant dropout as the day went. So it was really quite tough. So I hope I'm answering this, Martin. It's about getting your offering right of what are you actually offering on in your virtual world to your audience, and what value are they going to get from that? And that will often be about how they feel about the participation, but more importantly, it'll come down to content. So it's making sure that content is really honed for them. I hope that answers it. I can't see you nodding, so I'm a little concerned that I haven't answered it. Oh, thanks you, Martin. Let's whistle through some of these. Be great to have the ability to exchange virtual business cards. Can you do, David? Yes, you can. There are a couple of apps around that you can get up on the internet, but also I mentioned that the platforms are now cottoning onto this and getting around the GDPR by allowing the attendee to give access to their data. So you effectively are allowing people to connect with you, and then that's exactly what happens. You can exchange that. We use a platform called Events Air that works really well for that, and I've been one of their development partners since that started. So yes, that's available. Anna says, as you said, a hybrid event is very much like running 2 events. Would it not be better to run them on separate dates? After all, for AV, for recording and editing, cheaper than live streaming. So you can record the live event presentations one week and then show these online on a digital event. Completely agree. We have clients who say to us, we want to pre-record everything. And I'm, well, why do you want to pre-record everything? Oh, well, then we're in control. Okay, but then you've doubled your cost because you're going to record it, then you're going to edit it, then you're going to pay to stream it. Why not just pay to stream it and save the editing and the cost? Now, I know there are cases where a speaker can't make it, perhaps. It doesn't tie in. You've got a speaker on the West Coast and they can't make your meeting because it's got to be a breakfast meeting or whatever it might be. So I know that those conflicts can happen, but I would always advocate live streaming. And so I will slightly disagree about running 2 separate. I'd have a different agenda for my hybrid event, for my in-person event, than I would for my virtual element. But I would then make those sessions available online. That would be how I would do it, because people in the real world, physical world, are going to have that bit more energy. So if I'm attending an event, I want to see the keynote, there might be a particular panel I'm interested in, but then if I know I can access the other information and just watch that almost like a TV show afterwards, that's what I'm going to want to do. That's a personal thing, but I think it'd be interesting to see how it evolves, and it's only going to evolve by us making sure we get our data from attendees as they attend, in the same way we did with virtual. You know, we all got blooming zoomed out, didn't we? But we're still doing it to an extent, but we're doing them shorter, sharper, and hopefully a little bit more punchy in terms of their content. Does that answer your question, Anna? Oh, Lucy, thank you for the question, Lucy. Okay, so there is a reason for my dress code today. And to explain why, I'm going to just remove my background for a moment, and hopefully you might see something slightly different, and I'll explain why. Bear with me 1 second. I am on a canal boat. I'm on a canal boat because I'm on holiday this week, and when I tie things up, I realised that I hadn't put in a formal shirt to wear, so apologies. However, I'm on the Shropshire Union Canal, and to do this event with you, I'm using my laptop, which is connected to an inverter, which is taking a 12-volt battery feed from the canal boat turning it into a 240 volt so my battery will run. I've got my telephone connected to a 4G signal, which I've strategically placed the canal boat to do. And we're doing all of this through those methods. And the reason I tell you that is because hopefully it gives you an insight into, actually, if you want to get your event out, you can do it from anywhere. We've done them from the sides of mountains. We've done them from the middle of Cumbria and the Lake District. So yeah, this is the canal boat called Imogen, and it's been amazing. And when we finish, I'm going to be going back to a bit of canal boating down the Shropshire Union. So I hope that helps. I won't put my background now. Now you know who we are and what we're doing. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Gemma. I'll pop my email address in here. You won't get a response from me until next week if you. So I'll put it in the chat box. So if anyone wants to get in contact after the event, just make sure I've done that. Then if you want to get in touch with me for any questions or any follow-up, very happy to receive.
I think we have a question from Dragana.
Oh, I missed that.
Oh, wrong. No, her hand was up, but I don't
No,
think.
it was clapping.
Oh, clapping, sorry.
Thanks, Paul.
Oh,
Great.
thank you. I appreciate it. The good reason for choosing the Shropshire Union. On the part we're on, there's only one lock, and we've done it already. So. I hope it's been useful. I hope it's been insightful. If we can help in any way, give me a shout through the email. But thanks for having me, Natalie, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you very much, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the session, and Paul's put his email there. Or if you want us to help you get in touch with Paul, we're also happy to do that. Great session, Paul. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your holiday and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the good wishes. I appreciate it. Take care. Bye.